Hello, everyone. So, today I would like to discuss some issues with mindfulness. And so, mindfulness overall is a practice that has a lot of benefits. It allows us to gain a different perspective on our thoughts and emotions. It allows us to be clear minded. But there are also some issues with mindfulness. One of the issues with mindfulness is that a lot of times people are actually thinking with their eyes closed. So, they're not actually practicing mindfulness at all, they're not being attentive of what's around them. They're not being grounded in the present moment. So a lot of times people, when they're practicing mindfulness, they're just stuck in these thought loops and not really practicing at all. Another issue with mindfulness is that a very traditional way of practicing it is just by focusing on your breath. And an issue with this is that if you're someone who struggles with anxiety and you're just all of the time practicing breath awareness, you might become too aware of your own body. And for a lot of people, especially in terms of social anxiety, one of the things that they focus a lot is on how their body is feeling. And so mindfulness can also serve as a multiplier that increases this effect of just being too aware of yourself, and that for some people may not be necessarily the best course of action. A lot of times we just need to be more aware of our surroundings, more aware of what's happening around us, and by just practicing a lot this awareness of the body, you might be perpetuating too much awareness that will increase anxiety. Another issue with mindfulness is that it can be used as a goal-oriented practice. And an issue with making mindfulness as a goal-oriented practice, so let's say that your goal is to reduce stress, reduce anxiety, is that by doing so, you're limiting the effects that mindfulness can have. You're losing a lot of insight by just doing that. If you just focus on mindfulness as being something to take away the anxiety of, it very quickly becomes a practice where you're actually resisting to experience and not really trying to inspect your subjective experience. And so that is an issue that I think a lot of people struggle with. And so a lot of times it's important to enter a mindfulness or meditation practice without being so attached to a certain outcome. Even by just having that goal of anxiety relief can increase your anxiety, because you might go through a mindfulness practice, a mindfulness round, and you might leave it still feeling anxious. And then at the end, you will just be thinking, man, I just did all of this and now I'm still feeling anxious, so maybe mindfulness doesn't work at all. This leads us to another problem where mindfulness is at times used as a compulsion, as a form to suppress thoughts. So some people, a lot of people, when they hear about mindfulness for the first time, they just think about it as a way to think less, to suppress their thoughts, to just be, kind of enter this very Zen state, which I believe is very exaggerated, especially in mainstream media. But having that expectation obviously has some issues, because if you think that mindfulness is essentially a way to think less, to just, in a way stop your thoughts, then that will once again increase the resistance to such thoughts. You will increase thought suppression, and that will overall just increase anxiety. Another issue with mainstream mindfulness practices is that they drive you away from the understanding that actually mindfulness should be present throughout the whole of your day. It shouldn't just be a formal practice that is separated from the rest of your life. And so a lot of people do is they set some time apart during the day, for example, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, in which they are practicing mindfulness. But then the rest of the day, they are really far away from a state of mindfulness. They are just obsessively thinking. And so one of the things about mindfulness is that you should slowly try to integrate it as your normal state of being. And of course, that isn't to say that daydreaming rumination will go away, because they won't. And that's not an expectation you should have. Even people who have mastered the practice, they are still prone to a lot of the things that we mortals also experience. So I believe that it is very important to just understand that the goal with mindfulness is that you want to make it more and more so a less formal practice. Traditional mindfulness, so breath awareness, also has the issue of creating a dualistic perspective on consciousness. And so here, of course, there are going to be different opinions regarding this, but I believe that one of the best ways to model our subjective experience of the world is through non-dualism, which is this idea that there is no self separated from experience, that this idea that there is an observer and the observed is actually an illusion, and that this whole thing is sort of an integrated field of experience. And so one issue with mindfulness is that you will reinforce this dualist worldview in which you will be promoting this idea that you are a separate entity from the world and that you are somewhere up here in the middle of your head, in between your eyes. And by reinforcing that small sense of self, I believe that you are also limiting some of the insights that a meditation practice can bring you. Another thing that I see a lot of people who practice mindfulness not doing is that they normally just practice the way they want to feel. And so let me be a little bit more clear on this. So one question you need to ask yourself is whether you normally have most of your attention inside your head, so on your thoughts, your emotions, in your body, or are you normally paying more attention to the world around you? And so depending on what that answer is, you might consider doing the opposite of what you want. So if you're just very focused in your mind and your body, then try to focus more on the outside world. And if you are normally more aware of the world around you and less so on what is going on in your body and in your mind, and I believe that this second case is probably less prevalent than the first one. But even if that's the case, then do the opposite. Try to be more aware of your body and your mind. And so sometimes just going against the natural desire can be a good way to improve your mindfulness practice. And so, of course, here I'm not saying that you should neglect your feelings and just focus on the world around you. That's not what I'm saying. Because, and perhaps something that you should do is, if you are feeling some resistance to the practice, if you just don't want to stop, sit down and observe your thoughts or observe the sounds around you or the colors around you, and a lot of times there's this restlessness that is simply present because we are so used to being stimulated all the time. And I do not think you should neglect that. And so maybe just start by doing 2 minutes where you just really feel what that resistance feels in your body, and just be aware that you are feeling that resistance, because a lot of times we feel stuff that we are not really aware that we are feeling it. And so just bringing that awareness to the sensations, I believe, could be also an important aspect of your mindfulness meditation practice. And so lastly, some advice I would like to give you is that you most likely already know this, but there's a lot of different practices that go beyond just normal mindfulness. And I mean, most people, when they think of mindfulness, they just think about the breath awareness, and just know that there are a lot of different modalities to the practice. So just be free to explore them. Try to also practice open awareness, where you just avoid fixating on a certain aspect of your experience, where you actually just allow sounds, perceptions, sensations in the body all appear. And that can also be a very good way of practicing, especially when you just feel like you are someone who feels very stuck in his own head. And so I fully recommend also doing open awareness. Although, of course, focused awareness, which is the breath meditation and normal mindfulness, is always a good prerequisite for other forms of meditation, because in order to tackle into some insights of your subjective experience, such as the insight of selflessness, it is important that you build up some degree of mindfulness, some degree of concentration, because if you aren't able to concentrate for more than 10 seconds, then it is hard to do some more of these insight-driven meditations. But overall, that is something that I recommend. And also consider just being mindful of transitional moments in your day. And so when you switch activities, be mindful of those changes. When you're having lunch, dinner, or having a snack, really try to be mindful of what you're eating, because a lot of times these days we like to watch TV or we are on our computers while we are having meals. And so we are always kind of fragmenting our attention into very different things. And so just try to actually do one thing at a time. And I know we live in a culture where multitasking is seen as a perk, but really just try to do one thing at a time and actually be focused on what you're doing. Because ultimately, that is the goal of mindfulness. Mindfulness is not supposed to be something that you need to formally set aside and do. It's something that is supposed to be integrated into your way of being. But this takes a long time, especially because we live in a world that is constantly fighting for our attention. We have algorithms, we have technologies that are extremely good at changing the way we focus on things. And so, just take your time. Do not build these unrealistic expectations that you're going to become someone that can willfully control your thoughts, because that's simply just unrealistic. You can't really control your thoughts. That's something that you will discover very soon when you start meditating. And so overall, that is my opinion on the matter. I also think, and to clarify, I believe that mindfulness is an extremely good and worthwhile practice to do. I just decided to do this video to share some of the possible problems that might come when one starts doing mindfulness. Thank you.